All right, so UFC 249 is stacked. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to just run through the card, tell you who's on it, and then I'm going to break down a few of the fights because there are big breakdowns on a few of them, and I don't want to make you sit through 10 breakdowns to get to the ones that you really want to watch. But the ones that I'm going to run through are the fights that matter anyway, at least that I think matter. So you got Ferguson and Gaethje, obviously amazing. Cejudo versus Dominic Cruz. I can't believe they added that. It's incredible. I'm super, super hyped about that. Francis Ngannou versus Rosenstruck. I'm very excited about that. Ngannou's my dude. Jeremy Stevens versus Calvin Kattar. If you don't know who that Calvin Kattar guy is, definitely go watch like one of his last few fights. He lost his last fight, and I believe he fought Zabit. And wow, dude, he's legit, man. He is legit. Greg Hardy versus Jorgen De Castro. And then the prelims, you got Cerrone versus Pettis, Uriah Hall versus Souza, and the Karate Hottie versus Michelle Watterson. Werdum versus Oleinik. Okay, so I'm going to run through a couple of them really quick. So Uriah Hall and Jacare Souza, the reason that this is a great matchup is because both these guys have big names and both of them really need a win. Not as much as Cerrone and Anthony Pettis, but I'll break that one down in much more detail. I don't really have any idea who's going to win this Jacare Souza versus Uriah Hall one, so I'm not going to say, here, I think you should bet on this guy. But I love the matchup because one of them is going to get a win and they can build their name back up and then they can be in a contender. I will say that Jacare Souza being the 14th ranked middleweight sounds insane to me. Like there are 13 better middleweights than Jacare Souza. That does not make sense. I mean, every fight he's lost has been like a super, super close decision. And I just think he's had awful luck. Or there's something about him as a person that makes judges like go for the other guy. I don't know, because it seems very consistent. Werdum versus Oleinik. That one, I only have one thing. Here's the thing. Werdum is one of the most complete fighters that has ever fought in the last phase of his career. He was one of the most one-dimensional fighters for the first 2/3 of his career, where he was a ground fighter straight up. Then he learned how to strike and he started knocking out strikers, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, Fabricio Werdum is this good at striking now?" Like, wow, and that's why he was the heavyweight champion until Stipe knocked him out and has had his run since then. But Werdum is coming off juice. He's coming off of a juice pop, right? He pissed hot. So he is... Okay, hang on. Let me redo that. But Fabricio is coming off of getting popped for a violation for performance enhancers. So generally, guys who are in their 40s who are coming back off of a suspension for that particular thing don't fare very well. Because if a guy gets caught when they're 26 and then they come back when they're 28, they're usually able to kind of restart their career. But a guy who's in his 40s, that's a person who actually needs testosterone replacement. You know what I mean? And so you're talking about a completely different animal now. So I would probably bet against him, even though I have not done a lot of research on Oleinik. So as a matter of fact, don't bet that fight. But my guess is Werdum won't look very good. But here we go. Okay, so now a real breakdown. So Donald Cerrone versus Anthony Pettis. Here's the deal. So first of all, this matchup is genius and awesome because both these guys are huge superstars. People love these guys. And both of them have had a significant rough patch, right? Like, Cerrone, we don't need to walk through his. He got knocked out by, his last 3 losses have been to Tony Ferguson, Justin Gaethje, and Conor McGregor, okay? Those are the 3 toughest guys in the division except for Khabib. So it's not like you can say, wow, Cowboy's done because he lost to those guys. Those are like literally the best 3 fighters in the world at that weight class fighting on their feet, right? Like all 3 of them beat Cowboy on their feet, but they're like the best 3 fighters on their feet in the world, right? As a matter of fact, I think Khabib would have a much tougher time with Cowboy than those 3 guys. But so whether or not Cowboy's like done or it was just a rough patch because he was fighting the absolute top of the world, we'll find out. Anthony Pettis, he needs a win. He needs to like just get something going. He's a great fighter. But here's the thing, as a matter of fact, both Anthony Pettis and Donald Cerrone have the exact same problem on their feet. And I'll tell you exactly what it is. So both those guys look like the way they like to fight is they like to basically spar as hard as they can, right? Like they like to go in there and they like to get set. They like to kind of take their time, pick their shots, and then spar full throttle. Versus like being in a fight. Like it's like for them to be effective, they almost need their opponent to agree to the terms that they want to fight on, right? It's like any fight that you've seen Cowboy really kind of run through, like, Ally Quinta or, other guys like that, where it's when guys are basically like, okay, Donald, let's stand in front of each other and we'll spar as hard as we can. Anthony Pettis likes that as well. And when guys don't agree to those terms and they put constant pressure on them, these guys do not respond well to it at all. Both of them do not respond well to that whatsoever. Anthony Pettis, look at the Nate Diaz fight. Nate Diaz is not going to stand and agree to anything. He's just going to put constant pressure on you. And Anthony he had nothing for that. Nothing. It's not like he's a game fighter. Go watch his fight against Dustin Poirier, even against Ferguson before he broke his hands. He can bang, but he's best if they kind of stand in front of him. And, these guys are a perfect matchup for each other because they're both definitely going to do that. I am leaning towards Pettis, but probably just because I've seen Donald getting knocked out and he has a light chin, and Anthony Pettis definitely has the power to knock him out. So my guess is Pettis will win, but listen, Cerrone, again, he was fighting the absolute elite. Anthony Pettis is not Justin Gaethje, Conor McGregor, or Tony Ferguson, obviously. So, okay, Jeremy Stephens and Calvin Kattar. Again, this is very similar to the Anthony Pettis versus Cowboy fight. These two guys are mirror images of each other. I would say Kattar maybe has slightly more crisp striking, but these guys are mechanical, big power, hooks, straights, kicks. These guys are going to stand, they're mirror images of each other, and both of them have a lot of power. They're really, really strong in kind of the mechanical, these guys are, it's going to be a really exciting fight. I'm very, very excited for that fight. I have no idea who's going to win, though. Ngannou versus Rozenstruik. Here's the deal. You're never going to hear me say bet on anyone except for Francis Ngannou from this point forward. I think Francis Ngannou is literally not going to lose again. I think he's going to knock this guy out. I think he's going to do it in spectacular fashion. I think he's going to do it pretty early. And given that Rozenstruik went so out of his way to call Ngannou out, I think it's going to really make a statement where it's oh, you wanted Ngannou, huh? I just think that Ngannou is operating at a completely different level on his feet. I think that, he's fast, he's incredibly powerful, and because he is so much power, you can't even take a grazing blow from him. There's no other person that I've ever seen, except for maybe Shane Carwin, who had heat like that, where, look, if you watch heavyweight, if you watch any fight, you're standing there in order, you're here, and think about Israel Adesanya versus Yoel Romero, right? And the reason that fight was so boring is because Yoel Romero's sitting here like this, right? And he's I'm not going to move until Izzy does something. That's because you can't hurt a guy. If a guy is covered up, it's hard to hurt them in a way that's going to end the fight, right? But in order for you to hit a guy, you have to remove your defense, right? You have to take your hands away from your head. And bottom line is, when you do that, you get hit, right? Guys get hit. You're going to be hard pressed finding a guy who's so incredible on his feet that he almost never gets touched, right? When you fight Francis Ngannou, if he even touches you, you're unconscious, right? So this guy Rozenstruik, he's a striker. His whole game plan is going out and striking. He went 5 rounds with Alistair Overeem and then knocked him out in the 5th. Dude, what I see when I see that is, it took you 5 rounds to take out Alistair Overeem. Ngannou's going to decapitate you before that. To me, cool, you knocked out Alistair Overeem at the end of the 5th round. You're going to be unconscious 56 times fighting Ngannou before you get to the end of the 5th round. He's going to hit you. You're not going to be able to take it. No one can take a shot from this guy, right? So, unless he's developed a Stipe level of wrestling, but even, Curtis Blades is an even better wrestler than Stipe, and Francis dirt napped him in a minute. Twice. Or he beat him twice, but he dirt napped him in a minute the last time they fought. So I don't see how Rozenstruik, and no one has ever showed that Francis has a suspect chin. His only chance is to land something monstrous on Francis, right? And then see what happens. And it still would be the first time the guy's ever been knocked out. So anyway, I feel pretty confident you could bet pretty heavy on Francis. Now, Cejudo versus Dominic Cruz. That is a really interesting matchup because Dominic Cruz is excellent at just kind of like avoiding full throttle engagement. You know, he's like tricky, he's loose, he's kind of rubbery. His strikes come from weird angles because he's like, it's really hard to kind of like train for a Dominic Cruz, right? Like he's kind of like Nate Diaz, where like, you know, the reason he catches guys is because like, you know, like Jeremy Stevens and Qatar, their punches are coming from the same angles all the time, you know, and they're really good at it. And the way that they catch you is they show you this look, then they go low and they show you this one, and then they come here and you're scared to get hit in the body, and then they come up here. It's an angle you've seen, but they set you up to hit you with one that you've seen. Dominic Cruz, there's no rhythm. Like like you can't figure out these few different punches he's throwing. It's like they're all over the place, right? So he's very good in that capacity. Henry Cejudo is a surgical striker actually now, and he's obviously got an incredible ground game. I would imagine Cejudo might want to try to take Dominic Cruz down, but obviously, you know, Uriah Faber hasn't had success doing that with him since the first time they fought. So it's a really interesting fight. I mean, I'm not betting against Cejudo versus basically anyone. Like Cejudo's the good bet, period, right now. And then the last one. So Justin Gaethje versus Tony Ferguson. Here's the deal. So I'm just going to skip the part where Ferguson made weight when he didn't have to, except, no, I'm not actually. I'm going to talk about that specifically. Okay, so I actually did a video about this where I said, what's the point? Like, great, dude, you made weight, zippity-doo-dah, no one cares. Okay, I completely retract that. And I listened to DC talk about it, and what DC said is he was like, that's a statement, man. Like, he made weight for no reason. What other fighter would do that? And if you actually think about it in that context, in terms of the amount of agony you have to go through to cut weight, and the fact that Tony did it for no reason, here's the thing. The reason why fans can't connect with Tony is because Tony is not connected to the fans. That is not what he is doing. That's not how he sees this game. That is something annoying that he has to deal with to be successful in his role. But the way he's thinking, he's only thinking about the other fighters. And when he is standing across the octagon from you, and you're about to enter the fourth round, and you're so tired, your ribs broken, you could barely lift your arms, and you're looking across at him, and you're like, that's the guy that made weight for no reason. He's not breakable, and maybe I am breakable. It's a mental game. That's why he did it, to show the other fighters he is unbreakable. He'll do things you will not do. He'll dig to a place that you're not capable of. And that, again, completely changed my mind on it. Now I agree with DC that is like the most gangster move ever. In terms of the actual fight, it's very simple. Tony Ferguson takes chances. Tony Ferguson gets hit, okay? Justin Gaethje can knock anyone out, and he's very, very good. Great leg kicks. Great, Muay Thai and boxing. If he punches you in the face hard, you are going to go to sleep if he catches you when you're not seeing it coming. Tony Ferguson can get hit. It is very possible that Gaethje could knock Ferguson out early. That said, as soon as we get out of the second round, if Ferguson is still awake, this fight's donezo, okay? He's going to just... The way that Gaethje has lost has been to repetitive punishment over a long period, right? The reason why Gaethje has so much hype behind him right now is because he has 3 consecutive first-round knockouts since he lost to Alvarez and Dustin Poirier, who will come back to those losses. But the 3 wins were against James Vick. I would argue that it's not a meaningful win that you should hang your hat on as it relates to fighting Tony Ferguson, right? Then you have Edson Barboza. That's a good win. But Edson Barboza has lost very consistently in the last couple of years. He's a very legit striker, but here's the deal. And no one really talks about this. Barboza's, hand striking is not very good, okay? I'm sorry, I'm just going to say that. He has incredible kicks. Incredible kicks. His punching, his stand-up with his hands, not very good, might be a little bit strong, but it's not great. It's not world-class. And, his record illustrates that now, He has incredible kicks, hands, not so much. Gaethje knocked him out. Then you got Donald Cerrone. Conor knocked Donald Cerrone out in 40 seconds in the next fight, okay? So knocking out Donald Cerrone in the first round, again, not necessarily something you hang your hat on. So if you go back to the two fighters who look a lot more like Tony Ferguson that Gaethje's fought, you got Dustin Poirier and Eddie Alvarez. Okay, now I completely acknowledge that Gaethje said that he's made adjustments since fighting those two guys, but no one who knows anything about the sport is going to argue that his last three opponents are in the same class as those two guys. So it's still an untested theory that Gaethje made the meaningful adjustments, and then now he's back because Ferguson is just a better version of Dustin Poirier and Eddie Alvarez, right? He's a great wrestler. I would say his striking is a lot like Dustin Poirier's actually. Dustin Poirier on his feet looks a lot like Tony Ferguson actually. And I mean that as a sincere compliment to both of them. And then Eddie Alvarez has great wrestling, but they just stood and traded. And I mean, Justin Gaethje looks, like fighting Eddie Alvarez is basically a mirror image of each other. That fight was incredible. Those two guys basically are the exact same fighter, right? And Eddie Alvarez beat Gaethje through just repetitive compounding punishment that just on top of it, on top of it, on top of it, on top of it, on top of it. And the bottom line is, the reason why Justin Gaethje has fought the way that he has for so long is it's an instinct thing. He is a killing machine. He's going to walk you down. He's going to lean on you. He's going to hit you. He's going to take shots. He's going to give shots. He's an animal, and I mean that as a compliment. But if he is planning to do that with Tony Ferguson, he has to knock him out early because Tony Ferguson will never run out of gas. And if he's saying that he's made the adjustments, he has not been tested yet, okay? That has not been tested to where when he starts getting hit, is he going to be able to be conservative? Because he can't just keep getting hit by Tony, right? He can't just keep getting hit with those elbows, hands. And then, if anyone can put compounding punishment on someone more effectively than Tony Ferguson, I have not seen that, okay? He is the king of the exact way that Justin Gaethje has lost previously. At the same time, Justin Gaethje hurts people real bad when he hits them. And listen, Ferguson has been hurt many times in his fights. Just go back to the Anthony Pettis fight. He almost got knocked out. He showed incredible resilience and the ability to kind of roll out of it. He did some crazy stuff there, but if the shot that he got clipped with is a 3 millimeters down a little bit, and maybe he's unconscious or whatever. If he can be hurt, he can be knocked out. And Justin Gaethje can certainly knock him out, and he can knock anyone out. So that fight is very tough to call. I'm going to say Tony Ferguson just because how can you bet against the guy? He's proven. If they just would have put the belt on him and then left it there, and instead of it being interim, and then listen, this is the reality. They just gave that belt to Khabib, right? He didn't, they gave it to, they literally handed it to him. Tony Ferguson had the interim belt. He got injured, and they were like, "Oh, this one's for the real belt," and then they just put Al Iaquinta in there, and then gave it to Khabib. To say that Tony Ferguson's in any way less of a champion than Khabib is not correct. So, if you think of him through that lens, he looks pretty invincible. I don't think anybody could realistically be betting against Tony Ferguson. So, that is my breakdown. That's what I got. If you like the channel, subscribe, ring the bell, and tell everybody.